They say some choices define you forever. I never believed that until I made one that completely changed my life, and not in the way I hoped. You know that moment when you tell yourself, it's just something new, what could possibly go wrong? That was me, curious, restless, and tired of feeling invisible in my own home. If I could turn back time, I would erase that one yes. That one harmless decision that turned into a storm I never saw coming. It's strange, isn't it? How life can look so calm on the outside, the smiling pictures, the morning coffee, the I love you said out of habit, and yet, deep down, you feel empty. I remember that feeling clearly. Waking up every morning beside someone who felt miles away, even though he was just an arm's length from me. Talking, but not really connecting. Laughing, but only because silence was louder. Some nights I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when we stopped being us. When did love turn into routine? When did I start feeling like a guest in my own marriage? And then one day, out of boredom, or maybe desperation, I decided to try something new. Something different. Something that, at the time, I thought would help me feel alive again. Little did I know. That small step, that single, innocent decision, would pull me into a whirlwind of emotions I wasn't ready for. It started as curiosity, then excitement, then guilt. And before I realized it, I was standing in front of a mirror, staring at a version of myself I barely recognized. It's crazy how fast a moment can change everything, how a smile from someone new can shake the foundation you thought was unbreakable. I thought I was in control. I thought I was strong enough to stop before it went too far. But the truth? Once you start craving something you've been missing for so long, attention, affection, warmth, it's hard to let it go. This story isn't about villains or victims. It's about people. People who feel lonely. People who make mistakes trying to feel whole again. People like me. So before you judge, listen. Because maybe, just maybe, you'll see a part of yourself in my story. I never planned to hurt anyone. I never meant to cross any lines. All I wanted was to feel something real again. But instead, I ended up losing everything that once mattered. If I could go back, if I could rewrite that one chapter, I'd never say yes to trying something new. Because sometimes, new doesn't mean better. Sometimes, it means broken. Subscribe to Stories by TE, where we uncover the raw, untold truths of human emotions. Because what you're about to hear isn't just my story. It's a reminder that even the strongest hearts can fall when they're starved of love. When people look at my life from the outside, they say, you have everything a woman could ever want. A stable home. A hard-working husband. A comfortable routine. And for a while, I believed that too. But stability isn't the same as happiness. And comfort doesn't always mean peace. My name's not important. Let's just say I'm a woman who used to believe that love could survive anything, even silence. I've been married for 7 years to a man named Ethan. He's kind. Smart. The type of man people respect instantly. But somewhere along the way, the warmth between us disappeared, and all that was left was quiet. Our home used to feel alive, filled with laughter, movie nights, long conversations about our dreams. Now it feels like a museum. Everything is in its place, but nothing feels alive anymore. Ethan wakes up early, rushes through breakfast, kisses my forehead like he's checking off a task, and leaves before the coffee even cools. He comes back late, tired, distracted, sometimes with that faint smell of cologne that isn't his. Not because he's unfaithful, no. Ethan's not that kind of man. He's just absent. He's here, but not really here. I work from home, writing freelance content that barely excites me anymore. Some days, I'd sit by the window for hours, staring at people passing by. Couples holding hands. Friends laughing in cafes. And I'd feel this deep ache, a quiet reminder that I was alive, but not living. The walls started to feel closer every day. The hum of the refrigerator became my only conversation. I'd scroll through old photos of us, our honeymoon smiles, our goofy selfies, trying to remember how that version of us felt so natural. Now, even his laughter sounds like a stranger's voice in my head. I wasn't unhappy. Just numb. Every day felt like a repeat of the one before, same meals, same silence, same goodnight that felt like goodbye. Sometimes I'd walk around the house just to hear my own footsteps. Sometimes I'd talk out loud, to the plants, the TV, anyone, just to feel less invisible. People think loneliness only comes when you're alone. But the truth is, the worst kind of loneliness happens when you're lying next to someone who no longer sees you. There were nights I'd watch Ethan sleep, his face calm and distant under the dim bedside lamp. And I'd whisper things he couldn't hear. Do you still love me? Do you even see me anymore? He never stirred. Never answered. Maybe that was the answer all along. One Saturday morning, while folding laundry, I found a small tear on one of his shirts. Something about that tiny rip made me emotional. I just stood there, staring at it, realizing how it looked exactly like us, perfect from afar, falling apart up close. That's when it hit me. I needed to feel something again. Anything. Excitement, connection, warmth, even pain would have been better than this dull ache that followed me everywhere. That afternoon, I looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection stared back, tired eyes, messy hair, no spark. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. I wasn't angry with Ethan. I was angry with myself, for letting life become so small, so predictable, so colorless. And maybe that's why, when the opportunity came to try something new, I didn't think twice. I just said yes. Because sometimes, when your heart's been asleep for too long, even danger feels like a heartbeat. If only I'd known that in trying to wake myself up. I was about to step into the deepest sleep of my life, one filled with guilt, desire, and the kind of regret that doesn't fade with time. It started so small, so harmless, that even now, I still wonder if I could have seen it coming. A new fitness studio had just opened 2 streets away. Bright glass walls, loud music, and those posters of smiling people who looked like life hadn't touched them yet. At first, I just walked past it every morning on my way to the grocery store, glancing through the windows while pretending not to. The women in there looked confident, alive. And for the first time in months, I wanted to feel that way too. One evening, I caught my reflection in the glass. Loose sweater, tired face, eyes dull from staring at screens all day. I stood there, watching myself fade in the reflection between the neon lights and the moving silhouettes inside. Something inside me whispered, why not? So the next morning, I signed up. I told Ethan over breakfast, or rather, I mentioned it while he scrolled through emails. He barely looked up. That's good, he said flatly. It'll be good for you. Then he took a sip of coffee, checked the time, and left. I sat there for a moment after the door closed. The echo of it sounded final. Like even the house was tired of waiting for us to talk. The studio smelled like new paint and coconut body lotion. The music was upbeat, and people actually looked happy to be there, laughing, chatting, stretching together. I felt out of place at first, clutching my water bottle like it was some kind of safety net. That's when I heard a voice behind me. First time here? I turned around, and there he was. Ryan. He had that easy smile, the kind that felt warm without trying too hard. Tan skin, athletic build, and eyes that looked like they saw more than you wanted them to. He wore a simple black t-shirt and a whistle around his neck, his confidence effortless. I smiled awkwardly. Is it that obvious? He laughed, just enough to make it sound genuine. Only because everyone's first day looks the same, a little nervous, a little curious. That line stayed with me. He introduced himself as one of the instructors. Don't worry, he said, his tone playful. We don't bite here, not unless you skip warm-ups. I laughed. It had been a while since I'd laughed like that, the kind that came from somewhere unguarded. And for a second, I felt light again. Throughout the class, he was professional, friendly, encouraging everyone equally. But still, I noticed the small things. The way his gaze lingered a little longer when I struggled with a move. The way he said my name during the final stretch, slow, deliberate, like he wanted to remember it. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe it was everything. After the session, as I wiped sweat from my forehead, he walked up with a towel and that same easy smile. "You did great for your first day," he said. I shrugged. "I probably looked ridiculous." "Not at all," he replied. "You just need to loosen up, trust yourself more." Something about the way he said it didn't feel like fitness advice. That night, while making dinner, I caught myself replaying that conversation in my head. The tone of his voice. That smile. The way he looked at me like he actually saw me. Ethan came home late again. He tossed his keys on the table, gave me a tired nod, and went straight to the bedroom. No hug. No eye contact. Just the sound of the shower running behind a closed door. And while I stirred the soup on the stove, I realized I was smiling to myself, not because of him, but because of Ryan. It was such a strange feeling, wrong, but thrilling. For the first time in a long while, someone had noticed me. Not the wife. Not the quiet woman who keeps everything running. Just me. The next morning, I almost talked myself out of going back. I told myself it was silly, that I didn't need anyone's attention to feel good. But somehow, my body got dressed before my mind could argue. And when I walked through those studio doors again, Ryan noticed. "Back so soon?" he teased. I smiled. "Guess I'm trusting myself a little more today." He grinned, nodding approvingly. "Good. That's how change starts, one small step at a time. If only I'd known that some steps don't lead forward. Some take you straight into a place you can't escape from. Because what started as curiosity, as just something new, was about to turn into something far more dangerous. I told myself it was harmless. Just a class. Just a trainer. Just a little bit of attention. But I didn't know that a small spark could burn down an entire home. It's strange how quickly someone can start to matter. One day, they're a stranger behind a counter or standing in a crowd. And the next, you catch yourself rearranging your day just to see their smile again. That's how it was with Ryan. At first, it was just the gym, 3 mornings a week, a distraction from my thoughts. But slowly, he became the reason I woke up earlier, the reason I started caring about how I looked again. I began wearing perfume I hadn't touched in months. Fixing my hair, choosing my clothes carefully, things Ethan never seemed to notice anymore. Ryan, on the other hand, noticed everything. He remembered the smallest things, how I liked to stay near the window during class because I loved the sunlight, how I always tied my hair twice because one loop never felt secure enough. He'd ask questions no one had bothered to ask in years. "How was your week? Did you ever end up finishing that book you mentioned?" Simple things. But they made me feel seen again. And it's dangerous, isn't it? How being seen can feel like being loved when you've been invisible for too long. At home, I started to drift without realizing it. Dinner felt quieter. Conversations shorter. Ethan would talk about work, something about a new project, new deadlines, and I'd nod, pretending to listen, but my mind would wander. Sometimes, I'd picture Ryan's smile, or the way he said my name like it was something delicate. Then, one night, Ethan noticed. "You've been distant lately," he said while scrolling through his phone. I looked up, surprised, almost guilty. "Have I?" I asked softly. He shrugged. "Yeah. You used to ask about my day. Now you barely talk." I wanted to tell him, because when I do, you barely answer. But instead, I smiled weakly and said, "I guess I've just been tired." He nodded absently, still not looking at me. And that was it, the end of the conversation. Every time Ryan smiled at me, I heard my husband's silence in the back of my mind. Every time I laughed at one of Ryan's jokes, I remembered how long it had been since I'd laughed at home. The guilt was there, quiet but constant. It followed me like a shadow, whispering, warning, reminding me that something was wrong. But then I'd tell myself, it's not like I'm cheating. We were just talking. Laughing. Two people trying to make their days a little brighter. I told myself I deserved to feel appreciated too. That there was nothing sinful about wanting to be seen. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just friendship anymore. There was something charged in the air whenever we stood too close, something unspoken but heavy enough to feel. One afternoon after class, I lingered behind while everyone else packed up. The sunlight streamed through the glass wall, catching dust in the air like tiny golden sparks. Ryan was wiping down the equipment, humming softly. He looked up and smiled. "You've been improving," he said, tossing the towel aside. I laughed nervously. "That's what happens when you have a persistent instructor." He grinned. "Persistent or annoying?" I smirked. "A little bit of both." There was a pause, the kind that feels like it lasts longer than it should. Then he said, "Hey, you free after this?" I was gonna grab a coffee down the street. "Thought you might want to join." "Just as friends, of course." Just as friends. Those 3 words echoed louder than they should have. I hesitated, heart pounding in that confusing mix of excitement and fear. I wanted to say no, to walk away before I crossed a line. But then he looked at me, not with desire, not with pressure, but with warmth. Genuine warmth. And before I could stop myself, I heard my own voice say, "Sure, why not?" As he smiled, something in me shifted. A quiet, invisible door creaked open, one I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to close again. I told myself it was just coffee. Just a harmless chat. But my heart, it already knew better. Because sometimes, what feels innocent is just guilt in disguise, waiting for the right moment to show its face. They say temptation never arrives with warning signs, it comes softly, disguised as comfort. And for a while, that's exactly what Ryan was to me, comfort. Our harmless coffee meetups became a quiet ritual. Once a week turned into twice, then 3 times. We'd sit by the window of that little cafe down the street, talking about everything, books, childhood memories, dreams we'd long stopped believing in. He made me laugh until my stomach hurt, and sometimes, he'd look at me in a way that made me feel like I was glowing from the inside out. I told myself it was fine. That it was still innocent. But innocence, I've learned, has an expiration date. It started with messages, short at first. "Did you get home safe?" Then, "I can't stop thinking about that conversation we had." Before long, it was every night. Text bubbles became our secret escape. We shared things we didn't tell anyone else, our frustrations, our fears, our loneliness. He'd say things like, "You deserve to be adored," and I'd stare at the screen, my heart fluttering like a teenager's, even though I was a married woman in my 30s. Sometimes, I'd hear Ethan in the next room, typing away on his laptop, the faint tapping sound of a man lost in his own world. And there I was, in mine. A world where Ryan's words filled the empty spaces my husband no longer touched. I started changing. Subtly, at first. I began dressing differently for the gym, softer fabrics, colors that made me feel alive. I started wearing lipstick again, fixing my hair before class, caring about how I looked, not for Ethan, but for him. And people noticed. Even Ethan. One morning, as I packed my gym bag, he looked up from his coffee. "You've been spending a lot of time there lately," he said casually. I froze for half a second. "At the gym?" "Yeah, it helps clear my head." He studied me, longer than usual. "Then, you've been different. Happier, but not with me." My heart thudded painfully. I laughed it off, avoiding his eyes. "You're imagining things." But we both knew he wasn't. That evening, he ate dinner alone while I pretended to be running late from class. I remember that night vividly. Ethan sat in the dim light of our kitchen, his shoulders slumped, a half-eaten plate of food in front of him. He scrolled through his phone absently, waiting for a message that never came. Meanwhile, across town, I was sitting in Ryan's car, parked outside the cafe after hours, laughing about something stupid. Rain pattered gently on the windshield, the city glowing in soft, golden blurs outside. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Not with that kind of warmth. Ryan turned to me, his smile softening. "You have no idea how much I enjoy this," he said quietly. I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words. Part of me wanted to open the door, to walk away before I made a mistake I couldn't undo. But instead, I stayed. Days blurred into weeks. The messages became longer, more intimate. He'd ask about my childhood, my regrets, my marriage. And I told him, too much. He became the first person I thought of when I woke up, and the last one I texted before I slept. The lines between friendship and desire began to fade, thread by thread. Ethan noticed everything but said little. He grew quieter, his eyes darker. Once, I caught him watching me from the doorway as I smiled at my phone. He didn't ask who it was. He just turned away, that kind of silent pain that doesn't scream, but bleeds. I kept telling myself I could control it. That I could stop anytime. That I wouldn't let it go too far. But control is a fragile illusion when the heart is starving. And one evening, it finally shattered. It was after class, a late session. Everyone had left. The gym was empty, echoing with the sound of distant thunder outside. I was about to leave when Ryan stopped me. "Wait," he said softly, stepping closer. His voice was low, hesitant. "Can I be honest with you?" My heart raced. I tried to smile, to joke it off. "Honesty sounds dangerous." He didn't laugh. "I like you," he said. "More than I should." The air between us stilled. My breath caught, my body frozen, my mind spinning. He wasn't supposed to say it out loud. We weren't supposed to cross that line. And yet, the worst part wasn't his confession. It was that I didn't stop him. I didn't say, "Ryan, this has to end." I didn't walk away. I just stood there, silent, trembling, feeling something awaken that had been dead for far too long. He looked at me, eyes searching mine. "I know it's wrong," he whispered. "But tell me you don't feel it too." I wanted to lie. To tell him he was imagining it. But my silence, it said everything. In that moment, the world outside disappeared, the thunder, the rain, the sound of my own conscience. All I could hear was the pounding of my heart, and the echo of a truth I could no longer deny. Because that night, for the first time, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't just a flirtation anymore. It was a choice. A doorway I'd already stepped through, even if I pretended I hadn't. And as I drove home that night, with his words still echoing in my chest, I knew, the next time we met, something would break, and it wouldn't just be the rules. That night, the rain came harder than usual. It wasn't just weather, it felt like the world was trying to wash away something I hadn't even done yet. Ethan had left early for a business trip, his parting words quick, tired, unbothered. He kissed my forehead out of habit, not affection, and said, "Don't wait up for me." I smiled, but deep inside, something cracked. The house felt empty. Every sound echoed, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft pitter-patter of rain against the window. And then, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. "Can we talk?" "Just for a bit." I should have said no. I should have turned off my phone, pulled the blanket over my guilt, and slept it off. But I didn't. Because part of me wanted to see him, not for what we were doing, but for how he made me feel. Alive. The cafe was closed, so we met at the gym. It was late, past closing hours. Only the faint glow from the parking lot lights seeped through the glass doors. Everything felt wrong. And yet, every step I took toward him felt like gravity itself was pulling me in. He was waiting by the front desk, drenched from the rain, his shirt clinging to him. When he saw me, he smiled, not wide, not playful, just soft. Like he'd been holding his breath until I walked in. For a while, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, listening to the rain drumming against the windows. Then he said, quietly, "I tried to stop thinking about you." My throat tightened. "Ryan." He took a step closer. "Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll stop." I couldn't speak. Because lying would have been easy, but cruel. And the truth was, I did feel it. Every glance, every word, every silence between us had built up to this very moment. When his hand brushed against mine, something inside me broke open, a flood of emotions I'd kept locked away for years. The loneliness, the longing, the ache of being unseen, all of it came rushing out. He pulled me in, slowly, carefully, like he was afraid I'd disappear. And when our lips finally met, the world outside vanished. The rain became a whisper, the thunder, a heartbeat. For the first time in years, I felt wanted. Seen. Alive. But it wasn't beautiful. It was tragic. Because even in the middle of that moment, I knew. I was crossing a line I could never uncross. When it was over, I couldn't look at him. The room felt smaller, and my heart heavier. The air was thick, not with passion anymore, but with guilt. Crushing, suffocating guilt. He tried to speak, but I couldn't bear to hear it. I just whispered, "I have to go." And walked out into the rain, letting it drench me as if it could wash the sin off my skin. Each step toward my car felt heavier than the last. My hands were trembling. My chest felt tight. And all I could think was, what have I done? When I got home, Ethan had texted, just one line, "Made it safely. Miss you." I stared at that message for a long time. The man I'd vowed to love. The man who, despite the distance, still trusted me completely. And I had betrayed him. I sat on the edge of the bed, still soaked from the rain, staring at my reflection in the mirror, and for the first time, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. She looked older. Tired. Guilty. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because no matter how many times I told myself it was a mistake, the truth was, part of me didn't regret feeling alive again. And that was the worst part. Don't miss the next chapter of stories that expose the fragile lines between right and wrong. Subscribe to Stories by TEE, because the next story you hear might just hit too close to home. The next morning, the world felt different. Not brighter. Not darker. Just heavier, like every sound, every movement, carried weight I couldn't escape. I avoided the mirror. I couldn't look at myself. Ryan texted me that morning. "Are you okay?" I stared at the message for minutes before locking my phone and sliding it under a pillow like it was something dangerous. Because it was. All day, guilt clung to me like a second skin. I tried to cook breakfast for Ethan, pancakes, his favorite, but when he sat down to eat, I couldn't look at him. He said thanks, in that casual tone of his, but even that small word felt like a knife. Every movement, every glance, every silence between us carried meaning now. He didn't know what I'd done, but I did. And that was enough to poison everything. Days passed, and I tried to avoid Ryan completely. I skipped the gym. Ignored his messages. But guilt has a cruel way of turning into longing. I'd hear my phone buzz and my heart would race, not with fear, but with something worse, hope. I wanted him to stop reaching out, but I also wanted him not to. One evening, while Ethan was showering, I picked up my phone. His name was still there in my messages, Ryan. I hovered over it for a long time. Then I deleted his number. Closed the app. Took a deep breath. But an hour later, I added it back. Typed it in slowly, as if my hands were betraying me. Then deleted it again. And again. Over and over. Like my guilt and desire were fighting a silent war I couldn't win. Ethan started noticing. "Everything okay?" he asked one night, his voice calm but distant. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" I said quickly, too quickly. He watched me, really watched me, and for a moment, I thought he knew. He didn't say anything else, but his silence was louder than any accusation. From that night, something changed. He stopped touching me. Stopped asking about my day. Stopped looking at me like his wife, and started looking at me like a stranger he couldn't quite figure out. The house grew colder again. Not because of distance, but because I'd built a wall he couldn't see through. Ryan didn't help. He called once, late at night, voice soft, full of confusion and longing. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said. I closed my eyes, tears burning behind them. "Ryan, please don't," I whispered. He sighed. "Then tell me it meant nothing." But I couldn't. Because it did mean something. And that truth was tearing me apart. Every time Ethan's phone lit up, I panicked. Every question felt loaded. Every silence, suspicious. I'd catch myself studying his face at dinner, trying to guess what he was thinking. Did he know? Could he tell? Was he pretending, waiting for me to confess? The paranoia was relentless. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, certain he'd found out. Sometimes, I'd check his phone, then hate myself for doing it. My mind became a prison of what-ifs and maybes. Every glance from Ethan, every hesitation, every sigh, it all felt like a test. And I was failing miserably. One night, I came home from the store and found him sitting at the dining table, lights dim, just staring into nothing. His dinner was cold, untouched. He didn't even look up when I entered. I set the grocery bags down slowly. The silence stretched between us like an open wound. Finally, he spoke, quietly, but with a weight that froze me in place. "Is there something you want to tell me?" My heart stopped. The air left the room. For a second, I couldn't breathe. He looked up at me, calm, composed, almost too calm, and in his eyes, I saw everything I'd been trying to hide from. The suspicion. The pain. The truth he hadn't said aloud, but already knew. And in that single moment, I realized the storm I'd started was about to destroy everything in its path. I tried something new, and it changed everything. Not because it made me happy, but because it showed me what I'd already lost, long before I even met him. For weeks, I told myself that one mistake had destroyed my marriage. That a single night had broken everything apart. But that's not true, is it? The truth is, my marriage was dying in silence long before that night. We stopped seeing each other. Stopped listening. Stopped touching. And the saddest part? Neither of us even noticed when it started happening. I thought I needed someone new to feel alive again, but what I really needed was him. My husband. The man I promised to love through every quiet, ordinary moment. I just didn't know how to reach him anymore. Ryan wasn't the problem. He was just a mirror, reflecting everything I was missing, everything I was too afraid to say out loud. And in chasing that reflection, I lost myself. I kept replaying that night in my head, the rain, the guilt, the warmth that felt so wrong. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel it, not the touch, but the emptiness that followed it. That's what infidelity really is. Not passion. Not love. It's a search for something you can't find in someone else. Ethan never asked again if there was something I wanted to tell him. Maybe he already knew. Maybe he didn't want to hear it out loud. We started talking less, but also more carefully. Like two people walking barefoot across broken glass, trying not to bleed again. Did I confess? Did he forgive me? Did we move on? I don't know if those are even the right questions anymore. Because sometimes, there isn't a clean ending. No grand apology. No perfect redemption. Sometimes, transformation doesn't make you better, it just exposes who you truly are. And maybe that's the real punishment. Not losing someone else, but losing the version of yourself you once believed was good. So, yes, trying something new did transform my life. But not the way I thought it would. It didn't bring joy, or freedom, or love. It brought truth, raw, ugly, unfiltered truth. And that's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Because sometimes, The hardest part of living with guilt is realizing that the person you betrayed most wasn't your partner, it was yourself.